What if a single whisper could bend reality toward you? What if the universe was not deaf to your prayers, but waiting patiently, silently for you to speak in the one way it cannot ignore? For centuries, hidden within temples and texts, a forbidden practice was guarded under the name of Thoth, the ancient master of wisdom. The keeper of Hermetic law. Few were permitted to hear it, fewer still to practice it. This is not legend. Across Egypt, Greece, and the earliest Christian writings, the same thread appears. The word was never meant to be empty speech. It was a force, a vibration, a code that, when aligned with heart, mind, and spirit, moved creation itself. To misuse it was to scatter power into noise. To master it was to command reality with the same elegance that the stars follow their courses. Tonight, we open that door. You will not hear theory or speculation, but a living ritual step by step, preserved for those willing to test it. By the time this journey ends, you will hold in your hands the complete practice once considered too sacred to share, and the question will no longer be whether the universe listens, but whether you are ready to speak in the language it understands. Most people begin their spiritual journey with the same quiet question: why does the universe not answer me? They kneel, they whisper their prayers, they repeat affirmations until their voices grow tired, and yet the silence remains. It feels, at times, as though the heavens are deaf to human longing, but the truth is far more unsettling. The silence is not a rejection, but a mirror. What goes unanswered is not the prayer itself, but the contradiction within the one who speaks it. Imagine standing on a stage, before an orchestra. Each instrument is meant to play the same song. The violins tremble with one melody, the horns attempt another, and the drums stumble behind. No matter how passionate the conductor waves his arms, what emerges is not music, but noise. The audience hears confusion, not harmony. This is the hidden error that sabotages nearly every prayer. The mouth declares, "I am ready," while the heart whispers, "I am still afraid." The mind rushes in with doubt, asking, "What if none of this works?" The three voices, body, heart, and mind, do not sing in tune. They pull in opposite directions, scattering energy into fragments that never take form. What feels like devotion is, in reality, dissonance. Ancient alchemists described this imbalance through three primal forces. Sulfur was the burning fire of will, mercury, the flowing imagination of the mind, and salt, the body, steady and solid. When these three danced in rhythm, transmutation, the shift from potential to reality, became possible. But if even one partner faltered, the dance collapsed. Fire without focus only scorched. Imagination without grounding drifted into fantasy, and matter without spirit remained lifeless. The Egyptians had another word for this harmony. They called it Ma'at, the cosmic order. To live and pray in Ma'at was to align your inner vibration with truth, so that what you spoke had weight, not just sound. To break Ma'at was to fracture yourself, to speak one thing while feeling another, and to cut the thread that tied human voice to divine response. Think of it this way: every prayer is a seed. If the seed is planted in dry soil, it does not matter how many times you water the ground with words. Nothing grows. The soil must be alive, nourished, and ready to receive. In the same way, the universe does not respond to repeated phrases. It responds to coherence, to the hidden symmetry between word, emotion, and thought. This is the invisible error, the gap between what we say and what we truly vibrate. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You begin to ask yourself, have my words been carrying fire, or only ashes? Have I been conducting a symphony, or only scattering noise into the wind? It is a sobering realization, but it is also the first step toward real transformation. Because once you understand the error, you are already closer to correcting it. The universe has never been ignoring you. It has simply been waiting for you to play in tune. When we picture prayer today, do we imagine someone whispering into the silence, hoping that a distant heaven might listen? But in the ancient world, prayer was not frail or uncertain. It was structured like an art, engineered like a science. Every sound, every breath, even the stones of the temple itself, were chosen to amplify vibration. Prayer was not begging, it was resonance. In Egypt, the great temples of Heliopolis and Karnak were more than places of worship. They were vast instruments. Stone pillars stretched skyward, like tuning forks. Courtyards caught and carried echoes. Inner chambers held silence, so complete that a single syllable seemed to ripple forever. Priests did not raise their voices in desperation. They studied tone, cadence, and rhythm. with the discipline of musicians. A word uttered at the correct pitch was believed to return magnified, carrying back to the speaker the very frequency they had sent out. In that way, prayer became a dialogue between human and cosmos, voice and stone, the mortal and the eternal. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks followed a different but related path. Pythagoras taught that numbers and music were two faces of the same truth. To him, harmony was not only pleasant, it was evidence of the universe's order. The Orphic hymns, sung in temples and groves, were designed as soul hygiene. Just as the body needs cleansing, the soul, too, requires purification through sound. Rhythm and chorus washed away mental static, aligning human emotion with the deeper patterns of reality. To sing was not to entertain. It was to polish the mirror of the soul until it could reflect the divine light more clearly. Farther east, in India, the precision of sound reached an even more exacting level. A mantra was never a random phrase. Its power rested in transmission, passed down by masters who guarded the correct syllables like treasures. Each vowel, each pause, even the angle of the tongue mattered. The chest had to vibrate like a resonant drum, carrying the syllable in an unbroken line of sound. The practitioner did not shout into the sky hoping for intervention. They refined themselves until their vibration matched the real, and then reality itself responded. In this tradition, prayer was a finely tuned instrument, and the human being was both the player and the string. What unites Egypt's temples, Greece's hymns, and India's mantras is not coincidence, but convergence. All three traditions saw sound as a bridge. They understood that the universe does not react to empty words. It responds to coherence. To pray was not to plead. It was to step into rhythm with the hidden order that sustains the cosmos. This perspective changes everything. It means prayer was never superstition, never a desperate cry in the dark. It was an applied technology, a science of vibration. The ancients treated it with the same seriousness we now reserve for medicine or mathematics. To misuse a word was like miscalculating a formula. The outcome would falter, but when sound was aligned with image and emotion, it became more than voice. It became power, and so the temples stood, not merely as monuments of stone, but as resonating chambers of the invisible. Hymns rose in chorus, mantras carried through the breath, vibrations stitched human longing to cosmic law. To enter those spaces was to step into a laboratory of the sacred. The seeker did not ask for miracles, they participated in them. There is a thread that runs quietly through the great traditions of the world, a thread woven not of stone or ritual but of sound. It begins with an idea that seems almost too simple to hold such weight. Words shape reality. The ancients did not treat language as decoration or as a tool of convenience. For them, words were alive, carrying within them the very patterns of creation itself. To speak was not just to describe the world, it was to summon it. The Corpus Hermeticum, one of the oldest Hermetic texts, framed this truth with the phrase, "What is within is what is without." Every thought unspoken still vibrated, but when given a name, it crossed the threshold into the visible. Naming was not just labeling, it was alignment. To call something by its true essence was to bind your vibration to its frequency, as if striking the same note on a string until it hummed in harmony. The Gospel of John preserved this memory with its haunting opening. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Here, the word logos was not mere language, but the blueprint of existence. Creation itself began with vibration, with a sound that carried intelligence and intention. Everything that followed light, matter, life unfolded from that original resonance. To live in awareness of the logos was to walk in step with the rhythm that had given birth to the stars. The emerald tablets, attributed to Thoth, carried the teaching in a more direct command. Know the names, and you shall rule heaven and earth. For the Egyptian priests, knowing the name of a star or a spirit was more than memorizing. It was entering its inner current. To speak the name correctly was to access its power. To misuse or mispronounce it was to deform what one wished to call forth. In a universe sustained by vibration, precision mattered. Sound could ignite or extinguish. The same syllable, carried with the wrong resonance, could twist the flow of energy into something unrecognizable. Modern ears might hear all this as poetry, but the ancients spoke with exactness. A word was a seal, compressing power into a shape. To utter it was to unlock that seal and release force into the world. Think of the way a single command can move an army, or how one whispered phrase can transform a relationship. Magnify that by the scale of the cosmos, and you begin to glimpse why they treated speech with such reverence. This is why so many traditions protected secret names. The true name of a god, a river, even a human soul, was guarded like a treasure chest. To give someone your name was to hand them a piece of your essence, to allow them a key into your frequency. Even today, we feel this instinct. Names carry weight. To be misnamed feels like being distorted, as though part of you has been pulled out of tune. To understand logos, then, is to understand the stakes of language. Every word is a seed thought clothed in sound. Speak it with alignment, and it grows into form. Speak it without soul, and it falls as chaff on barren ground. This is why prayer, without belief, or affirmation without conviction, rarely takes root. The word must be fused with truth. When you see it this way, you begin to realize why the ancients called the word sacred. They were not speaking in metaphor. They were describing a technology as real as any engine, one that runs not on fuel but on vibration. The Logos is not a relic of scripture. It is the current still pulsing through every syllable you speak today, and to honor it is to remember that naming is creation, and creation begins with the sound you choose to release into the world. There was a time when words burned with life. A single phrase could open what felt like a hidden door in the fabric of the world. Prayer was not routine. It was an ignition, a spark of fire that leapt from heart to heaven. But slowly, across centuries, the fire dimmed. What had once been a living flame became ashes spoken in repetition. This is what the ancient teachers called the fall of the word. The tragedy was not in the disappearance of rituals, but in their hollow survival. People kept chanting, kept kneeling, kept speaking. But the axis that connected the human to the divine grew thin. The heart stopped breathing life into the syllables, and what remained was an empty shell. Sound without soul. It is the same as watching a musician go through the motions of a melody he no longer loves. The notes are correct, the timing precise, but the song is dead. Alchemists warned of this danger with sobering clarity. Without the fire of the heart, no transmutation can occur. You can repeat the formula 1,000 times, but if devotion has vanished, the words collapse into imitation. They called it opus mortuum, the dead work. What should have been a bridge became theatre. The ritual still echoed through temples, but the invisible world no longer stirred. You can almost feel the weight of that loss in the history of faith. Great halls filled with voices, but few hearts awakened. Prayers multiplied like copies of copies, each one weaker than the last. What began as a bridge of light between mortal and divine slowly hardened into stone, heavy and cold. The connection wasn't destroyed, but it was deformed, turned into something people performed for one another, instead of something they lived. And this raises a question worth carrying into our own time. How many of our words still carry breath? When we whisper our hopes before sleep, are we releasing fire, or only reciting lines we've memorized? The fall of the word is not a story of the ancients alone. It is a mirror we must all look into. There is a kind of sorrow in this realization, but also an opening, because if words lost their soul once, they can regain it. The silence that fell across centuries is not final. It is an invitation to recover what was forgotten, to take prayer out of performance and return it to presence, to speak again with the pulse of the heart, so that every syllable is alive with truth. If the fall of the word was the great forgetting, then the way back has always been through remembering the pillars that give language its power. Ancient traditions across Egypt, Greece, and the East all pointed to the same triad, though each gave it different names. In Hermetic practice, they became known as the three pillars of the living word: the seed thought, the fire of emotion, and the creative decree. Together, they formed a science of creation, a way to turn what begins as invisible desire into tangible reality. The first pillar, seed thought. Every act of creation begins with an image, not a vague daydream, not a passing whim, but a crystalline picture that holds its shape like a blueprint. The ancients called this the seed thought. Just as a builder cannot raise a temple without plans, the soul cannot build destiny without clarity. The seed thought is the inner sketch, drawn not in ink, but in vibration. Picture planting a seed in soil. If it is broken, incomplete, or malformed, nothing grows. The same is true of inner vision. A blurry, contradictory image will call forth confusion from the field, but a clear, sharp image resonates, as though the mind were handing the universe precise coordinates. Ancient texts, like the Corpus Hermeticum, describe this as aligning with the nous, the divine mind, where archetypes of all things dwell. To imagine vividly was not to fantasize. It was to step into the storehouse of eternal forms. The seed thought must be so alive. It feels like memory. You can see it, taste it, feel its texture. The mind is tricked, in the best way, into treating it as something already real. That precision of inner seeing plants the invisible seed into the soil of the universe. The second pillar, emotion fire. Yet a seed left in cold soil does not sprout. It must be warmed, nourished, ignited. This is the role of emotion. The fire of the heart is what gives weight and density to the image. Without it, thought drifts like smoke, pretty, but powerless. With it, thought becomes magnetized, drawing toward itself all things of like vibration. The alchemists spoke of this as the pneuma, the living breath that animates form. When you feel the joy, gratitude, or conviction of already having what you desire, you wrap the seed thought in flame. It glows with vitality. This is not about emotional excess or sentimental indulgence. It is about coherence, the deep warmth of a conviction so strong that the body itself believes. Think of emotion as the sun on a young sprout. Without it, the plant withers. With it, growth is inevitable. When heart and image merge, a magnetic field surrounds the thought, and reality begins to reorganize around it. Emotion is not a fleeting mood. It is the very force that makes the invisible tangible. The third pillar, creative word. The final act is the decree the moment sound gives body to thought and fire. This is the creative word, spoken with alignment. It is not mere sound, but vibration, carrying both image and emotion into the fabric of reality. The ancients saw it as lightning striking silence, fixing the pattern so that what was once only potential begins to take form. Here, speech ceases to be chatter. It becomes command. Not command in the sense of domination, but in the sense of planting a flag into the invisible, declaring, "This is done." The Egyptians called it heka, the word that organizes chaos into order. The Greeks called it logos, the intelligent vibration at the center of creation. Whatever the name, the principle was the same. A word fused with truth reshapes the field. This is why rituals ended with spoken decrees. They were not begging for divine favor, they were sealing the work, striking the final chord that completed the harmony of mind, heart, and body. The pillars together. When these three pillars unite, seed thought, emotion, fire, and creative word, something extraordinary happens. Prayer ceases to be superstition or routine. It becomes applied science. The seeker is no longer a beggar at the gates of fate, but a participant in the architecture of reality. This is why the Hermetic masters insisted the mouth alone cannot move the world, but the mouth joined with vision and fire can. A thought without emotion is sterile. Emotion without clarity is chaos. Sound without both is noise. But when image, fire, and word converge, they form a living current that cannot be ignored. To practice this is to rediscover prayer as it once was a technology of creation. It is to understand why the ancients guarded these teachings so closely, why they built temples of resonance, why they insisted on purity of tone and truth of heart. They knew that the word was never just speech. It was a force, and when the three pillars stood firm, it became the axis upon which reality turned. And so the seeker is left with a choice: to scatter words like dust into the air, or to build them on pillars that endure. One path leads to echoes, the other to creation, and the difference is not in the heavens, it is in the alignment within. There is a doorway we all cross every night, a threshold so ordinary we often forget its power. It is the moment before sleep, when the body softens into the sheets, the mind drifts between wakefulness and surrender, and the soul slips quietly into the deep. To the ancients, this was not just rest, it was sacred territory. They knew that what we place into the silence of this transition shapes not only our dreams, but the architecture of our waking reality. The nightly ritual begins not with words, but with breath. 3 breaths, each carrying its own purpose. The first is for the body. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly, letting the tension of the day dissolve from your shoulders, your chest, your hands. With that single breath, you tell the body, you are safe now. The second breath is for the mind. Let thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind, the endless worries and lists losing their grip. This breath quiets the chatter, leaving space for stillness. The third breath is for the spirit. It is the inward call, the centering of your being, a reminder that beyond flesh and thought, there is something eternal, waiting to guide. 3 breaths, 3 worlds, aligned in harmony. From that place of quiet, the second step begins. The vision This is where the seeker must learn the art of remembering the future. Do not see your desire as something distant, fragile, or yet to come. See it as though it has already unfolded, as though you are flipping back to a chapter you have already lived. Feel it in your hands. Smell its presence. Hear the echoes of its reality. The mind does not distinguish between memory and vivid imagination. It records both as truth, and so, when you visualize as memory, you hand the deep mind a story already written. 1. It will continue to replay until it blossoms into fact, but vision alone is not enough. The seed must be sealed with sound, and so the decree comes. Not shouted, not begged, but whispered with certainty. It is done. 3 simple words. Yet in them rests the full weight of creation. They are not a plea, but a proclamation. When spoken from alignment, the decree is like lightning, striking the soil, fixing the image into the invisible field. The Egyptians called this Heka, the word of power that binds chaos into order. To the seeker, it is the moment the invisible seed is planted, no longer just thought, but command. And then comes the shield, the vibration of gratitude, not the polite kind, not the mechanical thank you, said out of habit, but the deep, undeniable gratitude of one who has already received. Imagine the relief of a traveler stumbling upon water after days in the desert. That kind of gratitude cannot be faked. It rises naturally, a wave of peace that fills the chest. When you feel that gratitude, you wrap the decree in gold. It becomes protected, immune to the doubts and fears that might try to creep in. Gratitude is the seal, the invisible armor that tells the universe, this is already happening. Finally, you let go. Sleep is not abandonment, it is trust. The body sinks, the mind drifts, and the spirit hands the seed to the fertile soil of the unconscious. There, in the dark silence, the decree is watered. No resistance, no analysis, no doubt remains. The deep mind accepts what was planted and begins its work, shifting unseen gears, arranging patterns, moving the pieces of reality into place. To practice this ritual night after night is to participate in the oldest science of the soul. It is not superstition, it is discipline. It is the art of shaping the inner world so that the outer world has no choice but to mirror it. And in the morning, when the first light touches your skin, you rise already, carrying the vibration of what you planted. The day unfolds around that frequency, and reality bends quietly toward the image you have sown. The ancients believed that destiny is not written by chance, but by repetition. Every night offers the seeker a chance to plant again, to align again, to remember the future as though it has already arrived. The ritual is simple, almost deceptively so. 3 breaths, a vision alive as memory, a whispered decree, gratitude that seals, and the surrender into sleep, trusting that what is invisible tonight will press into form tomorrow. To plant the golden seed is to step into a dialogue with the universe, and with every repetition, the dialogue deepens. What begins as faith slowly becomes proof, and what was once only hope becomes the steady rhythm of creation. Every teaching of the mystery schools carried a warning: once is never enough. Transformation was never meant to be sparked by a single act, but by rhythm, by the slow pressure of repetition. One gesture may light a spark, but only repetition builds a flame that will not go out. The ancients compared the unconscious mind to clay. A single mark on wet clay may fade quickly, smudged by time, or forgotten by the hand that made it, but press into that same clay again and again, night after night, and the impression deepens until it can never be erased. This is the heart of the 7-night test. To practice the nightly ritual one evening is powerful. To practice it for 7 consecutive nights is transformative. The seeker may not see immediate fireworks, no thunder splitting the sky, no dramatic hand reaching down from heaven. What they will see are synchronicities, the subtle but unmistakable signs that reality has begun to bend toward the vibration they planted. An overheard phrase that answers an unspoken question, a phone call at just the right time, a number repeating on a clock or a receipt. At first, these signs seem small, even dismissible, but they carry the exact precision of the universe's reply. Imagine a river stone resting under a current. At first, it looks unchanged, untouched by the water rushing over it, but return after days, months, years, and the stone has been polished smooth, its roughness worn away by persistence. That is how repetition shapes the soul. Each night of practice, each decree, whispered into the threshold, presses deeper into the unconscious. and the unconscious, silent and patient, begins to reshape itself around the new imprint. The ancients insisted on 7 nights for a reason. 7 was the number of completion, the rhythm of creation woven into days, planets, and cycles. To repeat the ritual for 7 nights was to mirror that cosmic rhythm, to let your inner practice echo the structure of the heavens themselves. It was not arbitrary, it was alignment. At the end of those 7 nights, one of 2 things must be true. Either centuries of Hermetic wisdom, guarded in temples and manuscripts, practiced by generations of seekers, was a complete illusion, or the universe will respond. That is the challenge, and that is why the 7-night test carries such weight. It leaves no room for half-belief. It forces the seeker to place their trust not in theories, not in empty promises, but in lived experience. The anticipation becomes part of the ritual itself. Each night of practice carries a thread of suspense. Will tonight bring the sign? Will tomorrow? The seeker learns to watch their life with new eyes, to pay attention to whispers they once ignored. Waiting becomes its own discipline, a sharpening of perception, and when the sign does arrive, as it always does for those who persist, it is impossible to mistake. The body knows before the mind does. A shiver across the skin, a sudden clarity that says, the message has been received. Consistency is what transforms desire into destiny. The nightly ritual is the seed, but the 7 nights are the rain, the soil, the sun. Without them, the seed remains dormant. With them, it awakens, grows roots, and pushes toward the light. So the question is placed before every seeker. Will you test it? Will you dare to live the practice for 7 nights and see what happens? If you do, you will either expose an ancient tradition as false, or you will have proof, not from a teacher or a text, but from the universe itself. There is a fleeting moment each night, so brief, it often escapes notice. Yet the ancients guarded it. Like treasure, it is the threshold, the instant between wakefulness and sleep, when the conscious mind loosens its grip and the deep mind opens like fertile soil. In that fragile interval, the gates stand unguarded. What you project, whether hope or fear, slips straight into the unconscious, where it takes root beyond resistance. The Egyptians described this state as a sacred portal. The Greeks hinted at it in their myths of dream oracles. Medieval alchemists called it ora primo, the fertile hour, when creation begins, not in the heavens, but in the silence of a drifting mind. It is not long, not more than a few heartbeats, but in that pause, the invisible world listens with uncommon clarity. Consider what happens to a field at dusk. The farmer scatters seed just before the night dew falls. By morning, the earth has already begun its hidden work, cradling the seed in darkness, preparing it to sprout. The threshold state works the same way. A word, an image, a feeling introduced in this moment penetrates directly into the inner soil. Unlike in the daytime, when reason and doubt act like guards at the door. Here, there is no filter. The unconscious receives whatever crosses the threshold as law. This is both gift and danger. If you lie down whispering words of trust and gratitude, the deep mind records them as fact. If you fall asleep rehearsing fear, anxiety, or the bitterness of the day, that too is taken in, unchallenged, and begins to organize your reality around it. The ancients warned that this is how people unknowingly shape cycles of misfortune, not by curses from outside, but by planting the wrong seeds in the most fertile moment of all. Think of the mind at this stage as a still mirror of water. Whatever image is last held upon it, whether beautiful or distorted, will sink beneath the surface and live there. If you hand the mirror a vision of harmony, it will reflect harmony back into your days. If you hand it fear, fear multiplies. The unconscious does not argue, it does not analyze, it does not distinguish between "I don't want pain" and pain. It simply obeys vibration. That is why the threshold must be approached with reverence. The seeker learns to guard it like a doorway, entering it with intention rather than accident. A single negative thought at this moment can lodge itself with surprising strength. The way one stone dropped into still water ripples across the entire surface. Conversely, a single coherent decree whispered here can shift destiny itself. The beauty of this realization is also its burden. You cannot control the world while awake, but you are always seeding it while you sleep. The threshold makes no exceptions. It records the last vibration you carry into it, whether light or shadow. To walk through it carelessly is to surrender creation to chaos. To walk through it with awareness is to place your hand on the hidden gears of reality itself. So the ancients repeated the warning. Do not cross the threshold carrying fear. Purify the body with breath. Steady the mind with vision. Warm the heart with gratitude. Only then speak the decree and surrender to sleep. In that state of surrender, what you plant will not wither. It will germinate in silence and return to you in form. The seeker who learns to honor this portal no longer treats sleep as absence. They see it as sacred partnership. Each night becomes an act of sowing. Each morning becomes a harvest of what was planted the night before. And in this way, the threshold ceases to be an unconscious accident. It becomes the narrow bridge where two worlds meet, the seen and the unseen, the fleeting and the eternal, and the place where your word is given the power to endure. Among all the practices passed down from the ancient schools, one was considered the simplest, yet most powerful. Gratitude, not the shallow version we repeat out of politeness, but the deep current of thankfulness that rises unbidden when we feel life flowing through us. To the Hermetic masters, this state was not merely an emotion. It was a frequency, a shield, an invisible armor strong enough to protect whatever had been planted in the secret soil of the unconscious. Think of gratitude as a password spoken into the fabric of the cosmos. When the decree is whispered, it is done. Gratitude seals it. Without that seal, doubt and fear may creep back in, gnawing at the edges of the vision. But when gratitude is present, the decree is wrapped in gold. No resistance can touch it. The ancients described it as a circle of light surrounding the seed, keeping it warm, alive, and untouchable until the time of its sprouting. The beauty of this shield is its simplicity. It requires no elaborate phrases, no rehearsed incantations. A single word, felt sincerely, carries more weight than an hour of empty repetition. To whisper thank you from a place of conviction is to tell the universe, I have already received. It dissolves the anxious urge to ask again and again. Gratitude does not plead. It acknowledges. It shifts the vibration from lack to completion, aligning the seeker with the universal law of harmony. The alchemists compared this moment to the final stage of their great work, when matter reached its fullness and no longer needed fire or force. They called it rebis, the reconciliation. In that same way, gratitude marks the point where the seeker stops striving and begins witnessing. The work has been handed over to the universe. The vibration has been recorded. Gratitude is the quiet agreement that nothing more is required. Consider the feeling of relief after a long search, when you finally find what you were looking for. That softening of the chest, that release in the breath, that is the field gratitude creates. When carried into the threshold of sleep, it becomes a protective current. The deep mind, receiving it, interprets it as completion. To the unconscious, there is no difference between gratitude for something you already have and gratitude for something you believe you have received. Either way, the vibration is the same, wholeness. This shield does more than protect the decree. It also transforms the seeker. To live in gratitude is to walk through the world with armor invisible to the eye, but undeniable in effect. Situations bend, people respond differently, opportunities appear without struggle. Life itself becomes an echo of the frequency carried within. And so, the nightly ritual ends not with effort, but with surrender. After the breaths, the vision, the decree, comes only gratitude. No grand gestures, no insistence. Just the quiet thankfulness of one who knows the seed has been planted and protected. In that simplicity lies immense power, for what is wrapped in gratitude cannot be erased. It can only grow. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when theory must give way to proof. You have breathed, visualized, whispered the decree, wrapped it in gratitude, and surrendered it into sleep. You have done the work faithfully, night after night. But how do you know the universe has heard you? How do you recognize the reply? The answer does not arrive in thunderclaps or voices tearing the sky. It arrives quietly, woven into the details of your days. The Hermeticists called them echoes. We might call them synchronicities, those strange alignments that feel too precise to be random. A stranger speaks the exact phrase you had been turning over in silence. A song plays on the radio with lyrics that answer the question you never voiced aloud. You glance at the clock and see the same numbers repeating. Shiyi, Shiyi, San, Sanshasan, Wu, Wushawu. At first you dismiss it, but then it happens again and again, slowly. The pattern becomes undeniable. Synchronicities are the universe's handwriting, the coded proof that the vibration you planted has begun to ripple outward. They are not accidents. They are responses. In traditions from Egypt to Greece to India, seekers were trained to recognize these signs as feedback from the invisible. To miss them was to miss the dialogue. To see them was to realize you were no longer talking to yourself. You were in conversation with reality itself. Consider how a radio works. You turn the dial, tuning until the static clears, and a signal comes through. The universe is always broadcasting, but only when your inner frequency aligns do you pick up the station. Synchronicities are the first notes of that music breaking through the static. They confirm you have tuned correctly. These signs can take many forms. Some come through numbers, the repetition of patterns too exact to ignore. Others appear as chance meetings, a friend calling after years of silence, arriving at the exact moment their presence carries, meaning some appear in dreams, symbols returning with persistence, guiding you towards recognition. And sometimes the proof is physical, the opportunity that seemed impossible, suddenly opening, the door you thought was closed, swinging wide without effort. The power of synchronicity lies not only in the event itself, but in the feeling it stirs. You know it when it happens. The body reacts before the mind does. A shiver runs down the spine. The hair on your arms stands. The heart skips and steadies again. This is the language of resonance, the deep self-recognizing alignment, even before logic can catch up. As synchronicities multiply, doubt begins to dissolve. Life no longer looks like a string of coincidences. It begins to look like choreography. Events arrange themselves with precision, like stepping stones, appearing just as you lift your foot. The seeker realizes that reality is not indifferent. It listens, it responds, it obeys the coherence of vibration. And this recognition changes everything. Anxiety loosens its grip because you no longer walk blind. You begin to trust the signs, to see meaning, where once you saw only randomness. The missed train that leads you to the perfect meeting, the book that falls from a shelf, opening to the exact passage you needed, the repeated image in dreams that finally points you to a decision. Each moment is a reply, a confirmation that the seed is sprouting beneath the surface. At this stage, the universe ceases to feel like a distant force and begins to feel like a partner. You are not begging at its gates. You are in dialogue. Every synchronicity is its way of saying, I heard you, keep going. And the more you recognize the signs, the stronger the dialogue becomes, until the whole of life begins to shimmer with hidden correspondence. This is the proof the ancients promised, not abstract philosophy, not blind belief, but tangible signs woven into the fabric of daily life. If, after 7 nights of faithful practice, no signs appear, then one of 2 things must be true. Either centuries of Hermetic tradition, carried in temples and manuscripts, was utterly mistaken, or the universe has indeed responded. And when the signs come, and they always come to those who persist, you hold in your hands proof that is personal, undeniable, and alive. The journey of the seeker is no longer a lonely one. The synchronicities are companions, guiding lights on the path. Each repetition of gratitude, each whispered decree, each night of surrender deepens the connection, and as the signs multiply, they leave no room for doubt. You have struck the right frequency. The universe has answered. The world has obeyed. The invitation now is simple. Do not take these words as theory. Test them. Tonight, begin the ritual. Carry it through for 7 nights, without interruption. Watch closely, not with impatience, but with attention for the signs that will follow. A dream that lingers with unusual weight. A phrase that arrives in perfect timing. A number that repeats until you cannot ignore it. These are not coincidences. They are your proof. When the signs come, you will know. And when they do, share your journey. Write a single word in the comments. Love, peace, healing, prosperity, whatever you are seeking. Let this space become not just a channel, but a living archive of the proof that seekers like you have found. If the message resonated, pass it on. Share it with someone who is ready to remember that the universe listens. Support the work if you feel called, so that these teachings continue to reach those who need them. And above all, carry this with you. What you have heard is not belief, not speculation, but a practice. The ancients guarded it because it works. Now, it is yours to test. 7 nights, 1 seed, 1 decree. The rest belongs to the universe.